In the year 2389, humanity had spread its wings far beyond the cradle of Earth. Space stations floated among the rings of Saturn. Colonies dotted the surface of Mars, and grand starships ventured out to the distant stars, exploring the galaxy. Yet, in the vastness of space, love remained as mysterious and profound as the cosmos itself. Captain Lira stood on the bridge of the Astral Nova, one of the largest exploratory vessels in the United Interstellar Fleet. Her emerald eyes gazed out at the swirling nebula beyond the ship's hull, a cloud of iridescent dust and gas that shimmered like liquid silver. They had been assigned to this region of space to investigate an anomaly. No ships had ever returned from here, and all communications went dark within the nebula. Some called it a dead zone. Others called it a graveyard. But for Lira, it was personal. Her husband, Dr. Orion Zahn, a brilliant astrophysicist, had disappeared during an earlier mission to this very region 2 years ago. Official reports declared him missing, presumed dead. But Lira never believed it. She couldn't. Orion had been her world. They had met during a research mission near Europa. Their connection immediate and undeniable, as if the universe itself had woven their fates together. They shared not only a love for each other, but a fascination with the unknown, with what lay beyond the stars. Now, standing here, at the precipice of the same anomaly that had swallowed Orion's ship, Lira felt a familiar tug in her chest, a gravitational pull of the heart, urging her onward. She was going to find him, or at the very least, discover what had happened. "Captain, we're entering the nebula." Commander Vance's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood next to her, his hands clasped behind his back, his expression calm but laced with caution. "Proceed with caution, Vance," Lira replied, her voice steady but tense. "Keep the comms channels open and monitor the energy fluctuations. This nebula has a way of playing tricks on our sensors." As they plunged deeper into the swirling cloud, the ship's sensors flickered erratically, unable to make sense of the electromagnetic distortion surrounding them. The stars outside dimmed, replaced by a mesmerizing display of radiant colors, shifting and dancing like cosmic phantoms. The crew remained silent, eyes fixed on the view screen, their hearts beating in sync with the tension that filled the air. And then the anomaly appeared. It was a rift, a shimmering tear in the fabric of space itself, barely visible against the backdrop of the nebula. It pulsed with an energy that defied explanation, a rippling distortion that seemed both ethereal and dangerous. "Captain," Vance said, his voice hushed, "I'm picking up something, a faint signal. It's weak, but it's there." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "Can you trace it?" Vance's fingers flew across the console. "It's coming from inside the rift. It matches the frequency of the Orion, the ship that disappeared 2 years ago." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. The Orion was her husband's ship. Without hesitation, she gave the order. "Bring us closer." The crew worked quickly, guiding the Astral Nova toward the rift. As they approached, the energy around them intensified, and the ship's hull groaned under the strain. But Lira was relentless. She would not turn back now. As they passed through the rift, the world outside the ship changed in an instant. The nebula vanished, replaced by a starless void, vast and empty, yet filled with a strange, haunting resonance, like the echoes of a forgotten song. And then, there it was, the Orion, floating adrift in the darkness. Lyra's heart raced as the ship came into view. It looked intact but lifeless, as though it had been frozen in time. She felt a mix of relief and dread. The answers she had been seeking were within her grasp. But what would she find? "Prepare a boarding party," Lira ordered, her voice firm despite the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "I'm going aboard," Vance protested. "Captain, we don't know what's over there. You should stay on the Nova." "I'm going," Lira interrupted, her eyes blazing with determination. "This is my mission." A few minutes later, Lira and a small team were suited up and ready to board the derelict vessel. They crossed the void between the ships with magnetic boots and entered the airlock of the Orion. The lights flickered as they stepped inside, casting long shadows across the corridors. Everything was silent. Too silent. Life support systems are still operational, said Lieutenant Irina, one of the engineers on the team. "But I'm not picking up any life signs." Lira moved through the ship with purpose, her mind focused on one thing: finding Orion. The crew quarters, the labs, the bridge, all were empty, as though the crew had simply vanished. And then they found the stasis pod. It was in the medical bay, tucked away in a corner, its surface covered in a thin layer of frost. The pod was active, its occupant alive but in deep cryosleep. Lira approached the pod slowly, her heart pounding. She wiped away the frost on the glass and gasped. It was Orion. His face was peaceful, his chest rising and falling with the slow rhythm of suspended animation. He hadn't aged a day. Tears welled in Lyra's eyes as she placed a hand on the glass, her voice barely a whisper. "Orion?" The others gathered around, but Lira barely noticed. Her world had shrunk to the space between her and the man she thought she had lost forever. "Captain, we need to wake him up," Irina said gently, her voice pulling Lira back to the present. Lira nodded, wiping her tears. "Do it." As Irina began the reanimation process, Lira waited, her pulse racing. Minutes felt like hours as the stasis pod slowly powered down, and Orion's body began to stir. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, but then they found hers. "Lira!" His voice was hoarse, confused. She couldn't hold back the sob that escaped her throat. "Orion, you're alive. You're really alive?" He blinked, his hand reaching up to touch the glass, mirroring her gesture. How long has it been?" 2 years, Lira replied, her voice trembling. "I thought I lost you." Orion's expression softened as he began to remember. "We were investigating the anomaly. There was a malfunction. I had no choice but to go into stasis. I thought I would never see you again." Lira shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "But I'm here. I found you." They stood there for a moment, separated by the thin barrier of the stasis pod, but their connection stronger than ever. Finally, Irina completed the process, and the pod opened with a soft hiss. Lira helped Orion to his feet, their hands finally touching, warm and real. "I knew you'd come for me," he whispered, pulling her close. Lira smiled through her tears. "I'll always come for you." But as they embraced, a strange hum filled the air. The lights flickered, and the ship shuddered. The rift outside the Astral Nova was destabilizing. "We need to get out of here," Vance's voice came over the comms. "The rift is closing." Lira and Orion exchanged a glance. They had found each other, but the dangers were far from over. With the urgency of survival pulling them forward, they raced back to the Astral Nova, just as the rift began to collapse behind them. The ship shuddered violently as they crossed the threshold, but they made it, back into the swirling nebula, the rift sealing shut behind them. As the ship stabilized and the crew began their journey home, Lira and Orion stood together on the observation deck, watching the nebula fade into the distance. They had faced the unknown and emerged, their love stronger than ever. In the vastness of space, where time and distance stretched endlessly, love was the constant. A beacon, a force as powerful as the stars themselves. As the Astral Nova charted its course back to known space, a palpable sense of relief settled over the crew. They had survived the anomaly, defied the odds, and rescued Orion Zahn from the brink of oblivion. Yet for Captain Lira Kale, the mission's success marked the beginning of new mysteries, questions that tugged at the edges of her mind, refusing to let her rest. Orion stood beside her on the observation deck, gazing at the distant stars. Though the stasis had preserved his body, Lira could sense that something had changed within him. He seemed quieter, more introspective, as if carrying the weight of an experience he couldn't yet articulate. She stole a glance at him, noting the way his brow furrowed, the distant look in his eyes. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly, breaking the silence. Orion hesitated, his hand brushing the glass pane of the viewport, his fingers trailing through the faint condensation. "I'm trying to remember everything." 2 years feels like a blink in the stasis pod, but the time he paused, searching for the right words. "It's strange. The moment I woke up, I felt this pull. Like there's something I'm missing, something I need to understand about the rift. It wasn't just a tear in space. It felt alive. Lira frowned. Alive? How do you mean? I don't know. He sighed, rubbing his temples. While I was in stasis, I was aware of something. It wasn't like a dream, but more like fragments of thoughts, whispers. As if the rift was trying to communicate. Maybe it was the side effects of stasis. Maybe I was hallucinating. But part of me wonders if there's more to that place than we thought. Lyra's gaze softened as she placed a hand on his arm. You've been through a lot. We'll figure it out together. You're not alone in this. Orion gave her a small, grateful smile. But as his hand entwined with hers, Lira noticed a faint tremor running through his fingers. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to unsettle her. Before she could ask about it, the comms crackled to life. Captain Kale, you're needed in the briefing room. Vance's voice cut through the air. There's something you need to see. Lira exchanged a concerned look with Orion before tapping her comm device. On my way. She turned to Orion. Want to come with me? It might give us more insight into what happened out there. Orion nodded, and together they made their way through the winding corridors of the ship. As they entered the briefing room, they were greeted by a series of holographic displays hovering above the table. Commander Vance stood by, his face grim, while Lieutenant Irina manipulated the interface. What have you found? Lira asked, her voice filled with anticipation. Irina gestured to the swirling holographic map of the anomaly they had just escaped. We ran a deep analysis of the data we collected before the rift closed, and what we found, well, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. The hologram zoomed in on the rift structure, showing a complex lattice of energy patterns that defied conventional understanding of space-time. It pulsed with rhythmic waves, almost like a heartbeat. This, Irina continued, isn't just a spatial distortion. The energy signature is biological, in a way. It reacts, it adapts. In essence, it behaves more like a living organism than a simple anomaly. Orion's eyes widened as he stepped closer to the display. That's it. That's what I felt when I was inside. It wasn't just space. It was aware of us. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Are you saying that the rift is sentient? Vance folded his arms. It's a possibility we can't ignore. And there's something else. He tapped a control on the console, bringing up a new set of data streams. This is the communication we intercepted while inside the rift. At first, we thought it was interference, but when we ran it through an algorithm, the data resolved into a repeating pattern, an intricate series of tones and pulses, not unlike language. Lira leaned forward, studying the strange rhythm. It was haunting, melodic, like a song from another world. It's a signal, Irina said, her voice low. But we can't decipher its meaning. It's too alien, too complex. Whatever sent it, if something did, has a level of intelligence we can't begin to understand. Orion stared at the data, his expression distant. When I was in stasis, I felt like I was on the edge of understanding something. It was like the rift was trying to reach me, trying to show me something. Lyra's mind raced. The implications were staggering. A sentient rift, an ancient intelligence trying to communicate through it, perhaps through Orion himself. Was it a warning? A plea for help? Or something far more dangerous? We need to contact Fleet Command, Vance said, breaking the tense silence. This is beyond anything we were prepared for. If that rift is part of a larger network, or if it's alive in some way, we could be dealing with an existential threat. Lira nodded slowly. Agreed. But before we do that, I want to know more. We need answers before we alert the entire fleet. We need to understand what we're dealing with. Orion looked at her, a mix of resolve and unease in his eyes. There's only one way to do that. We have to go back. The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Lira knew he was right. They couldn't walk away from this, not now. The rift had let them go for a reason. But what if it wasn't finished with them? What if it's a trap? Vance asked, his voice hard with concern. Lyra's gaze shifted to Orion. She knew that the pull he had felt wasn't something they could ignore. It was as if the rift had marked him, chosen him, and in her heart, she knew she couldn't turn away, not when Orion was still tethered to it in some unknown way. We prepare for the worst, Lira said, her voice steady. We return, but on our terms. We'll take a smaller team, conduct a deeper investigation, and try to communicate with whatever is out there." Orion nodded, determination etched on his face. "I have to go back. I need to know what it wanted with me." Vance sighed heavily, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You realize this could be a one-way trip, Captain?" Lira's gaze never wavered. "We've been through worse, Commander. This crew can handle it. But if we don't go back now, we may never know what we're up against. And that's a risk I'm not willing to take." As the briefing ended, the crew dispersed to prepare for the new mission, the atmosphere on the Astral Nova thick with uncertainty. Lira and Orion lingered in the briefing room, alone amidst the flickering holograms. Lira turned to him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Are you sure about this? We could find another way." Orion met her gaze, his expression filled with quiet resolve. "I don't think there is another way. Whatever's out there, it's connected to me somehow. I need to face it. We both do." Lira wrapped her arms around him, pulling him close, their foreheads touching. The weight of the cosmos seemed to press down on them, but in each other's arms, they found strength. "No matter what happens," she whispered, "we do this together." Orion nodded, his voice a soft echo in the quiet room. "Always." The crew of the Astral Nova steeled themselves for their next mission, knowing that the mysteries of the rift, the sentient anomaly, and the strange signal were only the beginning. As they prepared to return to the heart of the anomaly, they could only hope that this time, the answers they sought would not come at a cost too great to bear. The crew of the Astral Nova worked tirelessly to prepare for their return to the anomaly. As the ship hummed with life, Lira felt a tension in the air, a mixture of anticipation and dread. The mission was clear, but the stakes had never been higher. In the engineering bay, Lieutenant Irina and her team made modifications to the ship systems, reinforcing the hull and recalibrating the sensors to withstand the strange energies of the rift. Commander Vance oversaw the tactical preparations, ensuring they had contingency plans in place. Meanwhile, Lira and Orion pored over the data collected from their previous encounter with the anomaly, searching for any clue that might guide them in their next attempt. Orion's mind raced as he examined the holographic projections of the rift's energy patterns. He felt a strange kinship with it, an unspoken connection that pulled at him, urging him to understand. Lira watched him work, admiring his dedication and resilience, but also worrying about the toll this mission would take on him. "Hey," she said, breaking the silence. "You okay?" Orion looked up, his expression momentarily distant. "Just trying to piece it all together. I can't shake the feeling that there's something I'm supposed to do, something I missed the first time we were there." Lyra stepped closer, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We'll figure it out together. Trust in that." "Trust," he echoed, his voice low. "That's what I'm afraid of. What if I'm not ready for whatever is waiting for us?" Lyra squeezed his shoulder gently. "We've faced the unknown before. Remember the storm near Titan? We made it through that because we had each other's backs. This is no different." Orion nodded, drawing strength from her presence. "You're right. I just can't shake the feeling that I need to go back. Like there's something inside me, waiting to be unlocked." "Then we'll go back," Lyra said with conviction. "But we'll go smart. We'll prepare for everything." After hours of preparation, the Astral Nova was ready to return to the anomaly. As the crew gathered on the bridge, Lyra felt a familiar mixture of excitement and anxiety. Orion stood by her side, a determined glint in his eyes. "Course plotted for the rift," Vance announced, his voice steady. "All systems ready." Lyra took a deep breath, her heart racing. "All right, let's do this. Engage." The ship surged forward, hurtling through space toward the swirling nebula. As they approached the rift, the view outside the viewport transformed, colors swirling in a kaleidoscope of hues, reminiscent of a cosmic dance. The crew's expressions were a blend of awe and trepidation. Entering the rift, Irina reported, her fingers flying across the controls. "Brace for fluctuations." As the Astral Nova plunged into the rift, the ship trembled violently, energy crackling around them like static electricity. Lyra gripped the arms of her captain's chair, her pulse quickening as the world outside morphed into a vibrant blur. Then in an instant, They emerged into the heart of the anomaly. The rift pulsated around them, its shimmering energy alive and vibrant. The ship stabilized, but the air was thick with an electric tension that made the hair on the back of Lyra's neck stand up. "Status report?" Lira commanded, her voice cutting through the charged atmosphere. "Everything's stable," Irina confirmed, though her brow was furrowed with concentration. "But the readings are fluctuating wildly. We need to get closer to the rift's core to gather more data." Orion stepped forward, his eyes scanning the swirling energy. "We should try to establish contact. I can sense it. The rift is trying to communicate." Lyra's heart raced at his words. "What do you mean, trying to communicate?" "I don't know how to explain it," Orion replied, his voice steady yet filled with urgency. "It's like I can feel its thoughts. There's a rhythm to it, a pattern. If we can align ourselves with that frequency, maybe we can reach it." "Then let's do it," Lyra said, her resolve firm. "Irina, can you adjust our systems to match the rift's energy?" "I can try," Irina replied, her fingers already dancing across the console. "But it'll take some time, and the energy fluctuations could be dangerous." "Time is something we don't have," Vance interjected, his gaze fixed on the pulsating rift. "We need to be cautious. The last thing we want is to get caught in a feedback loop." Ignoring the warnings, Lira focused on Orion. "If you feel connected, can you guide us? We can't waste this opportunity." Orion nodded, his determination palpable. "I'll do my best. Just keep the ship steady." With a deep breath, Lira gave the order. "Let's move closer. Irina, adjust the systems. Vance, keep an eye on those energy readings." As they maneuvered toward the rift, the crew worked in unison. Each member focused on their tasks. Orion closed his eyes, reaching out with his senses, feeling the pulsing energy of the rift resonate within him. The ship thrummed beneath him, and he felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. Suddenly, the rift's energy shifted, and a voice echoed through the ship's comm system, a low, melodic hum that reverberated deep within their bones. "Did you hear that?" Irina asked, her eyes wide with astonishment. Orion nodded, his expression intense. "It's it speaking. What's it saying?" Lira asked, her heart pounding. "I don't know," he replied, straining to focus. "But it feels like a call, a beckoning. It wants us to understand. Can you translate it?" Vance asked, skeptical yet intrigued. "I'll try," Orion said, pushing himself to concentrate. He closed his eyes again, letting the rhythm wash over him, seeking the underlying patterns that pulsed with the energy of the rift. He focused on the resonance, allowing it to guide him. Suddenly, images flooded his mind. Glimpses of vast landscapes of shimmering colors, creatures of light and energy swirling around, and a deep, ancient consciousness that felt both welcoming and terrifying. He felt the weight of time, of lost civilizations and stories untold, pressing against him. Lira watched Orion, her heart aching at the effort he was exerting. "Orion, stay with us. We're right here." He opened his eyes, breathless. "I think it's trying to show me something. Something important." "Then let it guide you," Lira urged, her voice filled with encouragement. "We're ready. Just be careful." As he closed his eyes again, Orion reached out with his thoughts, trying to connect with the rift on a deeper level. The voice grew stronger, and the ship trembled slightly as if reacting to his efforts. Lira could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the rift's energy pressing against them, but she stayed resolute. Suddenly, the ship's sensors began to blare, a warning signal piercing the charged atmosphere. Irina cursed under her breath. "We're picking up massive energy spikes. The rift is destabilizing." "Hold steady," Vance shouted, gripping the console as the ship shook violently. "We need to get out of here." "Not yet," Lira yelled back, her voice steady. "We can't leave without understanding this." "Lira, we don't have time," Vance replied urgently. "We're losing control. Just a little longer." Lira insisted, her eyes locked onto Orion's. "Orion, focus. You can do this." With a final surge of concentration, Orion reached deeper into the rift's consciousness. The hum of the voice resonated within him, a profound connection that sent waves of energy cascading through his body. He felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, as if he had stepped into a vast web of existence that transcended time and space. Images flooded his mind once more, visions of the rift's creation, of beings that had once inhabited its depths, their essence woven into the fabric of the universe itself. He saw the dangers they had faced, the sacrifices made to protect the balance of the cosmos. The rift, Orion gasped, his eyes snapping open. It's a protector, a guardian. It contains the essence of those who have passed through, and it's trying to warn us. There's something coming, something that threatens not just this rift, but everything. Lyra's heart raced as she processed his words. What do? We need to stabilize the rift and amplify its signal, Orion explained urgently. If we can create a resonance with its energy, we can defend against whatever is approaching. Vance nodded, adrenaline coursing through his veins. How do we do that? Combine our energy systems with the rifts, Irina suggested, her fingers moving quickly across the console. It'll create a protective barrier. But we need to do it now. Everyone, we need to work together, Lyra shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Orion, guide us. Irina, you know what to do. Vance, keep the ship steady. As the crew sprang into action, Orion closed his eyes again, tapping into the rift's energy, feeling the ebb and flow of its pulse. Lyra stood beside him, her presence grounding him as they worked in tandem. Align the frequencies, Orion urged, feeling the rift responding to his thoughts. We need to synchronize our systems. Irina adjusted the controls, her eyes darting across the readings. I'm adjusting the emitters. On my mark. Now, Orion shouted, channeling the energy of the rift through the ship. The Astral Nova vibrated as it synced with the rift's energy, the very fabric of space around them shifting in response. Waves of light erupted from the ship, cascading through the rift, forming a protective barrier that shimmered like starlight. The warnings intensified as shadows moved in the distance, dark shapes emerging from the edges of the rift. Lyra's heart sank. What are those? Orion's focus sharpened. I don't know, but they're coming for us. Get ready, Vance shouted, activating the ship's defenses. We need to hold them off while we stabilize the rift. As the shadowy figures drew closer, the protective barrier flickered, pulsing with energy as it absorbed the incoming darkness. Lyra felt the ship resonate with power, a connection forged between them and the rift, a dance of light and shadow that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Orion felt the rhythm of the rift guiding him, its energy melding with his own, urging him to harness the chaos. We can't let them through. We have to hold the barrier. With every ounce of will, he pushed against the shadows, channeling the energy of the rift into a focused beam that shot outward, colliding with the approaching figures. The impact sent ripples through the fabric of reality, shattering the darkness into fragments of light that danced away like fireflies. But the shadows pressed on, relentless and hungry. Lyra's heart pounded as she felt the strain of their combined energies. We need more power. Reinforce the emitters, Irina shouted, frantically working the controls. If we can amplify the output. Orion, can you give it more? Lyra asked, her eyes locked onto his. I'll try. Orion gritted his teeth, focusing on the connection he felt with the rift. The images flooded back, visions of guardians, of energy swirling in the cosmos, and the echoes of a warning that resonated deep within him. He pushed deeper, pulling more energy from the rift as it responded to his call. The ship surged with power, and the barrier pulsed brighter, sending forth waves of radiant light that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. But the shadows didn't relent. They twisted and morphed, taking form as grotesque figures that screamed with rage, their voices echoing like thunder. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine as the ship shuddered beneath the weight of their presence. We can't hold this forever, Vance shouted, his voice strained. We need to finish the stabilization now. I'm trying, Irina replied, sweat glistening on her brow as she fought against the chaotic readings. The energy output is at maximum. Orion, Lyra called, desperation creeping into her voice. We need you to hold the line. With a fierce resolve, Orion drew upon every ounce of energy from the rift, feeling its essence surge within him. He could sense the consciousness of the rift melding with his own, amplifying his strength, his will. He opened himself completely to the rift, allowing it to guide him. In that moment, he understood the rift was not just a protector. It was a part of him, a reflection of his own journey, his struggles, and his fears. Together, they were bound by a shared purpose. "Lira," he cried, his voice ringing with conviction. "We can do this. Trust the connection." Lyra's heart swelled with determination as she felt the bond between them deepen. Together, with renewed focus, Orion unleashed a wave of energy that enveloped the shadows, transforming their darkness into brilliant light. The grotesque figures writhed and twisted, their screams morphing into echoes of harmony as the barrier held strong, illuminating the space around them. As the light surged forth, the shadows began to dissipate, retreating before the radiant energy. The ship stabilized, the rift's protective barrier growing more formidable with each pulse of light. "We're pushing them back," Vance shouted, a triumphant grin breaking through his earlier tension. "Keep it up," Lyra encouraged, her heart racing as she felt the tide turning. Orion, fueled by their shared energy, reached out one final time. "I can feel it. The rift wants us to understand. It's trying to show us the way." With a final surge of energy, the barrier exploded outward, sending the last remnants of darkness scattering into the void. The rift glowed brighter, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos, as the crew of the Astral Nova stood united in their triumph. Breathless and exhausted, Orion opened his eyes, feeling the connection to the rift resonate deep within him. He had faced the darkness, embraced the unknown, and emerged stronger. The shadows had been vanquished, but a new understanding lingered in the air, a promise of secrets yet to be unveiled. "Did we do it?" Irina asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. Lyra turned to Orion, who was still catching his breath. "We did. We held the line." As the rift settled into a shimmering calm, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. They had faced the darkness together and emerged victorious, but a new challenge loomed on the horizon. "Now what?" Vance asked, looking at the serene rift that pulsed gently before them. Orion took a deep breath, his mind racing with possibilities. "Now, we need to understand what just happened. We've only scratched the surface." Lyra nodded, her determination rekindled. "We'll analyze the data and see if we can communicate with the rift again. There's so much more to learn." As they began their assessments, Lyra felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. They had come back to the rift, faced the shadows, and emerged stronger together. And in that moment, she realized that their journey was far from over. Days turned into weeks as the crew of the Astral Nova continued to study the rift. The data collected from their encounter revealed intricate patterns, suggesting a complex system of communication. Orion, still deeply connected to the rift, worked alongside Irina to refine the ship's systems for future interactions. One evening, as the stars twinkled outside the observation deck, Lyra found Orion gazing into the vastness of space, lost in thought. She approached him, feeling the warmth of their bond envelop her like a familiar embrace. "You're still thinking about the rift, aren't you?" she asked, leaning against the railing beside him. Orion nodded, his expression pensive. "I can't shake the feeling that there's more to discover. It's like the rift is waiting for us, as if it has secrets that need to be shared." Lyra smiled softly, the corners of her mouth lifting. "You've become a part of it, haven't you? It's calling to you." "It feels that way," he admitted, a hint of wonder in his eyes. "Every time I close my eyes, I see it. I feel its energy. There's a connection that I can't explain." "Then maybe it's time to explore that connection further," Lyra suggested, her voice gentle. "We can make another attempt to communicate. If the rift is alive, perhaps it's willing to share its knowledge." Orion turned to her, gratitude shining in his gaze. "You do that for me?" "Of course," she said, her voice steady. "We're in this together." Always the following day, Lyra called the crew into the briefing room, to discuss their next course of action. As the members gathered, a mix of excitement and anxiety filled the air. Everyone, Lira began, her gaze sweeping across the faces of her crew. We've gathered valuable data from our previous encounter with the Rift, and I believe it's time to make another attempt to communicate. Orion feels a strong connection to it, and I want to support that exploration. Are you sure that's a good idea? Vance asked, his brows furrowed with concern. What if the shadows return? We've fortified our defenses and learned from our last encounter, Lira replied confidently. But we'll proceed with caution. Our priority is understanding the Rift's nature and the knowledge it holds. I can guide us, Orion added, stepping forward. I feel the Rift's energy. If we focus, I think I can reach it. Irina nodded, her fingers tapping the console. We can adjust the emitters to create a more stable connection, amplifying the Rift's resonance with our systems. Then it's settled, Lira said, determination in her voice. We'll gather the necessary equipment and prepare for another attempt at communication. As they divided into teams, Lira and Orion exchanged glances filled with unspoken understanding. They both knew the risks, yet the promise of discovery outweighed their fears. As the Astral Nova approached the Rift once more, the atmosphere on the bridge was charged with anticipation. The swirling colors of the anomaly pulsed rhythmically, a mesmerizing dance that seemed to call out to them. Entering the Rift, Irina reported, her voice steady but tinged with excitement. All systems are green. Keep the ship steady, Lira instructed, her eyes fixed on the Rift. Orion, are you ready? Orion took a deep breath, feeling the energy of the Rift swirl around him. Ready as I'll ever be. As the ship plunged into the Rift, the familiar tremors began, but this time they felt different. Less chaotic and more like a welcoming embrace. Lira felt the ship resonate with a harmonic frequency, a connection that transcended the physical realm. Stabilizing the connection, Irina announced, her fingers flying over the controls. We're syncing with the Rift's energy. Orion closed his eyes, tuning into the rhythm of the Rift. The voice he had heard before echoed in his mind, a harmonious melody that resonated with the very core of his being. Can you hear it? He whispered, his heart racing. Lira leaned closer, feeling the energy pulse around them. I can feel it. It's beautiful. Focus on that connection, Orion urged, his voice steady. I'll try to guide us deeper. As they settled into the Rift's embrace, Orion felt a surge of energy coursing through him. The boundaries between them and the Rift began to blur, and he sensed its consciousness reaching out, inviting them to explore its depths. Hold on, Irina warned as the ship trembled, the energy fluctuations intensifying. We're experiencing a surge. Orion gripped the console, feeling the Rift's energy intertwining with his own. I can handle it. Just be careful, Lira said, her voice laced with concern. With determination, Orion focused on the rhythm of the Rift, allowing its energy to flow through him. The voice grew stronger, weaving through the fabric of his thoughts, urging him to embrace the connection. Suddenly, images flashed before his eyes, visions of a vast cosmic landscape filled with colors and shapes beyond comprehension. He saw ancient beings, guardians of the Rift, their forms swirling in the currents of energy, watching over the balance of existence. Orion gasped as he felt their presence. They're here. The Guardians, they're watching us. What do they want? Lira asked, her eyes wide with awe. They want us to understand, Orion replied, feeling the weight of their gaze. To protect the balance. Suddenly, a voice resonated within the ship, a chorus of harmonies that transcended language, filling the air with a powerful message. The crew felt the energy shift, the ship vibrating with an otherworldly resonance. They're showing us, Orion said, his voice filled with wonder. The essence of existence, the connection between all living things. We need to share this understanding with the universe. Lyra's heart raced as she absorbed the magnitude of their experience. How do we share it? By becoming a part of it, Orion said, his eyes shining with determination. We can amplify their message, spread their wisdom across the stars. Irina's fingers danced across the console, calibrating the ship's systems. If we can project the rift's resonance, we could reach out to other systems, connect with other beings. Do it, Lira urged. We can't let this opportunity slip away. As the ship stabilized within the rift's energy, Orion concentrated, channeling the power of the Guardians through him. The essence of the rift flowed like a river of light, intertwining with their own energies, ready to be shared. Now, Irina shouted, pressing a final button. The ship erupted with light, a brilliant beam shooting into the cosmos, a message of unity and connection reaching out to the stars. The rift pulsed around them, a heartbeat that synchronized with their own, sending forth a cascade of colors that danced across the void. Orion felt the connection deepen, a symphony of energy resonating within him, echoing through the fabric of existence. "It's working," he exclaimed, his voice filled with joy. Lira smiled, overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment. "We did it. We've shared the rift's message." As the light from the rift dissipated, the crew stood in awe, hearts pounding from the experience. They had tapped into a connection that transcended the physical realm, a bond that would resonate throughout the universe. "Status report," Lira called, her voice filled with excitement. "All systems stable," Irina replied, a grin spreading across her face. "We successfully projected the rift's resonance." "Do you think it reached anyone?" Vance asked, his eyes shining with curiosity. "I hope so," Lira said, her voice softening. "But even if it didn't, we've forged a connection that will last a lifetime." Orion turned to Lira, his heart full of gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me." "I believed in us," she replied, her gaze steady. "Together, we can face anything." As they looked out at the serene rift, a sense of peace settled over them. They had faced the darkness, embraced the unknown, and emerged stronger. The connection forged within the heart of the rift would guide them on their journey, a beacon of hope in the vastness of the cosmos. And as the Astral Nova drifted away from the rift, the crew knew their adventures were only just beginning. The universe held countless mysteries, waiting to be uncovered, and they were ready to explore them together. Months passed, and the crew of the Astral Nova continued their journey through the stars, exploring new worlds and encountering beings from distant galaxies. The connection forged with the rift remained a guiding force in their lives, a reminder of the power of unity and understanding. Orion had become a conduit for the rift's energy, using his unique abilities to connect with other civilizations. The messages they shared resonated through the cosmos, creating bonds that transcended language and culture. Lira, ever by his side, found joy in exploring the vastness of space with him. Their love blossomed amidst the stars, growing stronger with every challenge they faced. One evening, as they stood on the observation deck, gazing out at a nebula painted in hues of purple and blue, Orion turned to Lira, his heart full. "Do you ever wonder if we'll find the Guardians again?" he asked, his voice soft. "I think they're always with us," Lira replied, a smile lighting up her face. "In every connection we make, in every life we touch." Orion nodded, feeling the warmth of her presence. "You're right. We carry their wisdom with us." As they gazed into the infinite expanse of the universe, they knew that their journey was far from over. The stars held endless possibilities, and together, they would continue to explore, uncovering the echoes of the cosmos, one adventure at a time. The Astral Nova sailed on, a ship of dreams and love, a testament to the power of connection in a universe filled with wonder. And as they ventured into the unknown, they carried the light of the rift within their hearts, a beacon of hope guiding them through the stars.